I always considered myself a person who believes only in logic, in chance, in the laws of physics. But that night, my name is Daniel. I am 22 years old, and I study at the University of Nairobi. Together with my friends, Kofi, Ali, Samir, and Emily, we decided to take a small trip across Kenya. We wanted to see real nature, wild animals, and feel the freedom. We chose Masai Mara, one of the most beautiful nature reserves. We rented an old but sturdy minibus. Peter, our classmate and the best driver among us, volunteered to drive. We packed our backpacks, stocked up on food, music, and set off. I remember that evening well. Before the trip, I went home to say goodbye to my mother. She was always someone who could sense things before they happened. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "Son, be careful." "Mom, what could possibly happen? It's just a trip." She sighed and shook her head. "I will pray for you." I laughed, hugged her, and told her everything would be fine. Back then, I had no idea how powerful her prayer would be against any randomness. The road was long but fun. We laughed, sang loudly, and talked about university gossip. The stars shone on the horizon, and it felt like the world belonged to us. But about 3 hours into the journey, Peter frowned. "Something wrong?" I asked. "The road is getting slippery and there's fog ahead. We need to be careful." I looked ahead. Indeed, the fog lay on the ground like thick milk. Visibility dropped, but none of us thought much of it. That was a mistake. Out of nowhere, a huge truck appeared. Its headlights blinded us, and the sound of brakes pierced our ears. "Hold on!" Peter shouted. A terrifying crash. Everything flipped. A deafening noise. Darkness. When I regained consciousness, I didn't understand where I was at first. My whole body ached, and the air smelled of smoke and gasoline. I tried to move, pain shot through me. Someone groaned nearby. "Kofi? Are you alive?" I croaked. "Yeah, but it hurts." I turned my head. Our minibus was overturned. The body was crushed, the windows shattered. Some of us were moving, some were silent. And then I remembered. The prayer. My mother prayed for me. But how did we survive? At that moment, I realized this was just the beginning. I tried to get up, but a sharp pain shot through my right leg. Cursing, I sank back to the ground, breathing heavily. The air was thick with smoke, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I looked around. Kofi lay beside me, clutching his ribs, his face covered in blood. Ali, Samir, and Emily were barely moving, but they were alive. "Peter, where's Peter?" I asked, scanning the wreckage. The minibus was so crushed that the driver's seat had practically disappeared into twisted metal. Silence. I realized he wasn't coming out. In the distance, I heard footsteps. Someone was approaching. Out of the darkness, an elderly man emerged, holding a flashlight. He stopped when he saw us, his eyes widening. "This is impossible," he whispered. I could barely speak, but I forced myself to ask, "What?" The old man glanced at the wrecked minibus and slowly shook his head. "I've seen accidents. Many of them. But you weren't supposed to survive." I swallowed hard. "But we are alive." "Yes," he nodded. "Because someone prayed for you." His words hit me like a lightning strike. At that moment, I knew this night would change me forever. I stared at the old man, and he stared back at me. There was something strange in his gaze, as if he already knew why we had survived. "You need to leave this place," he finally said. "But, Peter," Kofi muttered. The old man slowly shook his head. "Your friend is gone." My heart clenched. We had lost him. But there was no time for tears. In the distance, I heard the sound of an engine. "The truck," Ali whispered, looking toward the road. I turned. The headlights were still on, but the truck driver was gone. "He ran away," Samir murmured. "We have to get out of here," the old man repeated. "You're in danger." I didn't understand what he meant, but something in his voice made me believe him. Struggling, leaning on each other for support, we began to move away from the wrecked minibus. I didn't know where we were going. I only knew one thing. We had been saved by a prayer. And this was only the beginning. We walked through the darkness, stumbling over rocks and tree roots. The pain in my legs and arms was becoming unbearable, but we couldn't stop. "Where are we going?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. The old man who had helped us out of the minibus walked ahead, lighting the way with his flashlight. "To a safe place," he replied shortly. Anxiety boiled inside me. "Who are you, anyway? Why were you there on a night like this?" The old man stopped and looked at me. "My name is Mzee Omari. I live nearby. I wasn't supposed to be there, but something called me." "Called you?" Kofi asked warily. A voice. Inside. We exchanged glances. "You mean, something warned you?" Ali asked. Mzee Omari slowly nodded. "I heard a prayer." Chills ran down my spine. "Whose prayer?" "A woman's. She was calling out to God, begging to save her son." I stopped breathing. "My mother?" Omari looked straight into my eyes. "Yes." The world around me seemed to shift. I remembered my mother hugging me before I left, her worried eyes, her words about praying. This couldn't be a coincidence. But there was one thing we didn't know. The danger wasn't over yet. We kept moving through the darkness. The forest grew denser, the trees seeming to close in above our heads. I could hear Kofi's heavy breathing, Ali's quiet groans of pain. But more than anything, I couldn't stop thinking about the old man's words. "You really heard my mother's prayer?" I asked again. Mzee Omari nodded. "I heard it as clearly as I hear your voice now." She prayed with such desperation that her words pierced the night. I couldn't ignore them. I swallowed hard. "That's impossible." The old man gave me a faint smile. "There are things in this world that cannot be explained by logic, son." I didn't respond. Up ahead, a faint light appeared. "We're almost there," Omari said. My heart pounded faster. We were walking into the unknown, but I felt that something important was waiting for us. What we didn't know was that danger was following close behind. We emerged from the forest and found ourselves in front of a small hut. It stood on a hill, and from here, we could see the winding road in the distance, the place where the accident had happened. Mzee Omari stopped at the door and turned to us. "You can rest here." I looked at my friends. They were exhausted, their wounds still bleeding, but we were alive. We stepped inside. The hut was simple, a wooden table, a few chairs, a hearth with glowing embers. Old masks and charms hung on the walls. "Sit down," Omari said, pulling out a clay jug of water. We obediently took our seats. "Tell me everything that happened," he asked, pouring water into cups. I took a deep breath. We were just driving. It was dark, foggy. Suddenly, a truck appeared. It was coming straight at us at full speed. It didn't slow down? Omari interrupted. I shook my head. The old man frowned. Then it wasn't an accident. A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Omari was silent for a long moment before he spoke quietly. "The truck. It's not the first." The room fell into silence. "What?" Emily asked. The old man looked at us. "There have been many accidents in this place. And too many of them were too strange to be coincidences." I felt something tighten inside me. "Are you saying someone is doing this on purpose?" Omari met my eyes. "Yes." A cold shiver ran through me. We had walked into a trap, and I had no idea how to escape. The room was filled with an oppressive silence. Only the crackling of embers in the hearth and our uneven breathing broke it. We exchanged glances, each of us thinking the same thing. What the hell is happening here? "Who?" Kofi asked hoarsely. "Who could have set this up?" Omari sighed and shook his head. "There are people who don't like it when others survive where they were supposed to die." I frowned. "You're speaking in riddles," I exhaled. "Explain." The old man looked toward the window. His dark eyes reflected the dim light of the hearth. "This stretch of road is cursed," he finally said. "For decades, accidents have happened here. People think it's just a coincidence. But I know the truth. This place takes lives. It demands sacrifices." "That's nonsense," Emily cut in. "It's just a dangerous road. There are probably issues with the pavement, sharp turns." Omari slowly turned his head toward her. "Do you believe in coincidence?" She opened her mouth but found no words. "We have to leave," Samir said firmly. "Find help, get out of here." "I agree," Ali added. "We can't just sit here and wait until—" Outside, footsteps echoed. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Someone was out there. Omari immediately extinguished the lantern and motioned for us to stay silent. We pressed against each other, straining to hear through the darkness. The footsteps grew closer, and then I heard it. A quiet knock at the door. Twice. 3 times. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. They knew we were here. I swallowed hard. Omari slowly stood up and, without turning, whispered, "Whoever it is, don't make a sound." We held our breath. The door creaked open, and suddenly, a blinding light pierced the darkness. Several figures in black cloaks burst into the room, their faces hidden beneath hoods. They said nothing, but their presence made the air itself tremble. One of them stepped forward and pulled back his hood. He was an older man with deep wrinkles and cold eyes. "You were not meant to survive," he said in a flat tone. "You disrupted the balance." "What balance?" Kofi shouted. "You were destined to die, but a prayer altered the course of events. Now you must make a choice." The man extended 2 ancient amulets, one dark, one light. "Either you accept your fate and stay here forever, or one of you must sacrifice themselves so the others may leave." Silence hung in the air. We exchanged glances. Who among us would be willing to take that step? Then, without warning, Omari reached for the dark amulet and clenched it in his hand. "I am old," he said. "You must live." Before anyone could stop him, a strange glow surrounded his body, and he vanished, dissolving into thin air. A wild howl echoed outside, and then everything fell silent. The cloaked figures disappeared as suddenly as they had arrived. The door no longer creaked. The night was still once more. We stepped out of the hut. The road ahead was empty. "He saved us," Emily whispered. I looked up at the sky. Among the stars, I could almost see Omari's silhouette, watching over us with a gentle smile. We were free. But now, I understood, a mother's prayer was stronger than death. And I would carry that debt for the rest of my life.